In the bustling streets of London in 1770, the British Empire stood at the zenith of its power, its ships laden with treasures from distant shores, its factories humming with the promise of progress. Yet beneath this veneer of dominance, storm clouds gathered, both across the Atlantic and on the home front. That March, news arrived of the Boston Massacre, where British redcoats, cornered by a jeering mob of colonists, fired into the crowd, leaving 5 dead in the snow. To many in Parliament, it was a regrettable skirmish, a symptom of unruly provincials chafing under just authority. But the pamphlets and prints flooding London told a different story, one of tyranny that echoed the grievances of Wilkes and liberty back home. Far from these tensions, Captain James Cook, that intrepid navigator, pushed the boundaries of empire further. In April, aboard the Endeavour, he planted the Union Jack at Possession Island, claiming the vast east coast of Australia for King George III. Botany Bay's shores, teeming with strange flora and fauna, symbolized boundless opportunity, a counterpoint to the shrinking grip on older colonies. Yet even as Cook's maps redrew the world, old rivals stirred. In June, Spanish forces under Don Juan de Madariaga swooped on the Falkland Islands, expelling British settlers from Port Egmont in a bold assertion of Bourbon claims. London erupted in outrage. War fleets mobilized and the crisis teetered on the brink. Only frantic diplomacy averted catastrophe, with Britain withdrawing under the Convention of 1771 but vowing to return. It was a humiliating retreat, exposing the fragility of sea power when stretched thin. Domestically, the decade opened with cautious optimism. Lord North assumed the premiership, promising stability after years of ministerial musical chairs. The townshend duties, those irksome taxes on colonial glass and paper, were mostly repealed, save for tea, a symbolic nod to parliamentary sovereignty. But economic tremors soon shook the foundations. In June 1772, the credit bubble that had inflated trade with America and the East Indies burst spectacularly. Fordyce's Bank in London collapsed, dragging down Scottish houses like the Ayr Bank in a cascade of failures. Merchants in Glasgow and Amsterdam watched fortunes evaporate as bills of exchange turned to ash. The Bank of England, that bulwark of finance, injected millions in liquidity, averting total ruin. This first modern banking panic rippled globally, from Baltic ports to Virginia plantations, reminding Britons that their empire's wealth rested on a house of cards. Across the ocean, defiance hardened. Rhode Islanders, incensed by the revenue cutter Gaspee chasing smugglers, boarded and burned her in 1772, vanishing into the night without trace. Secret committees of correspondence wove a web of colonial solidarity, sharing grievances from Boston to Charleston. Then came the Tea Act of 1773, a desperate lifeline for the debt-ridden East India Company, allowing it to flood America with cheap tea while retaining the hated duty. To colonists, it was poison. On a frigid December night, the Sons of Liberty, faces blackened in Mohawk guise, hurled 342 chests worth a king's ransom into Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party, as it came to be known, was no mere prank but a thunderclap. Parliament's response was swift and severe. The coercive acts of 1774, dubbed intolerable by the aggrieved, by the Ichthmo. Boston's port slammed shut until restitution. Massachusetts' charter gutted. Troops quartered in homes. The Quebec Act, extending Catholic rights in Canada, fueled Protestant paranoia of a popish plot encircling the colonies. These measures galvanized resistance. The First Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia, pledging non-importation and petitioning the king for redress. In Britain, merchants in Liverpool and Manchester decried the trade disruptions, while radicals like John Wilkes thundered against ministerial tyranny. The powder keg ignited in April 1775 at Lexington and Concord, where Minutemen's musket cracks signaled open war. The shot heard round the world, it was called, as British columns retreated under withering fire, leaving 273 dead and wounded. 3 months later, at Bunker Hill near Boston, General Howe's redcoats stormed Breed's Hill in bloody waves, prevailing only after 3 assaults and 1,000 casualties. It was a Pyrrhic triumph, sapping morale and coffers. King George III, unmoved, branded the rebels traitors in August, vowing suppression. Yet doubt crept in. Even as Hessian mercenaries swelled the ranks, whispers in coffeehouses questioned the cost of coercing kin. Thomas Paine's Common Sense, that incendiary pamphlet, sold 120,000 copies in 1776, framing independence not as rebellion, but destiny. On July 4th, the Declaration rang out from Independence Hall, severing ties with a prince whose character is marked by every act which may define a tyrant. British forces under Howe captured New York in September, scattering Washington's ragged army, but the Continental Congress's audacity stunned London. Howe hesitated at Philadelphia, allowing Washington to regroup and strike brilliantly at Trenton on Christmas night, reviving rebel hopes. The year closed with the Hessians routed at Princeton, a morale booster amid winter's bite. 1777 brought turning points. Burgoyne's expedition from Canada aimed to split the colonies, but at Saratoga, American riflemen and artillery ensnared his army. The surrender of 5,000 troops in October was a catastrophe, not just militarily, but diplomatically. France, smarting from the 7 Years' War, saw vindication. Benjamin Franklin's charm in Paris bore fruit. The war, once a colonial squabble, ballooned into global conflagration. By 1778, French fleets menaced the Channel, clashing inconclusively at Ushant. Domestically, North's government eased Catholic penal laws with the Relief Act, a pragmatic nod to Irish recruits needed for the fight, but old hatreds festered. Innovation offered solace. James Watt patented his separate condenser in 1776, transforming Newcomen's clunky engine into a powerhouse for mills and mines, whispering of factories to come. Samuel Crompton's spinning mule, perfected by 1779, married Jenny and waterframe, spinning fine cotton thread by the mile. The alliances widened. Spain, eyeing Gibraltar, and Jamaica declared war in 779, launching the Great Siege that would grind on for years. Dutch merchants, irked by blockades, followed in 1780, the East Indiamen prizes for British privateers. Trade routes choked, prices soared, and bread riots flickered in port cities. Then, cataclysm at home. The Gordon Riots of June 1780 engulfed London in the worst urban violence in centuries. Lord George Gordon, a fiery Protestant zealot, marshalled 60,000ers to petition against the Catholic Relief Act, branding it a papist resurgence. What began as a march devolved into anarchy. Newgate Prison stormed, its inmates freed, the Bank of England besieged, its windows smashed, Catholic chapels and ambassadors' homes torched. Flames lit the sky for a week. 285 lay dead, $100,000 in damage wrought. Troops under the King's command quelled the mob, but the scars lingered, a stark warning of religious fissures and the perils of reform in wartime. As 1780 waned, Britain reeled. The American War drained $10 million yearly. The national debt ballooned to $232 million. Yorktown's humiliation loomed, but even in defeat, resilience stirred. The lost colonies humbled the empire, spurring parliamentary inquiries into corruption and the rights of man. Yet Watt's puffs of steam and Crompton's whirring mules heralded a new era where iron and coal would forge Britain's industrial supremacy. The 1770s tested the soul of the nation, blending imperial hubris with domestic fury, exploration's thrill with financial fright. From Botany Bay's promise to Boston's blaze, it was a decade that shattered illusions, sowing seeds of revolution abroad and reinvention at home.